This video was sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Netflix has looked a bit down in the dumps recently with the removal of Doctor Who from its UK library. That's okay though, we still have iPlayer, right? Yes, but only in the UK. If you travel abroad and want to watch the show, Surfshark will allow you to do so wherever you are in the world. Same thing applies to Facebook in China or TikTok in India. Surfshark VPN also gives you access to multiple online media libraries that are locked out of the UK. American Netflix has shows like The Walking Dead, Broadchurch, Dexter, and Twin Peaks that I think are all worth a binge. Surfshark is also the only VPN that allows for unlimited devices on a single account.
And it works on the Amazon Fire Stick.
A very common household object.
And if you don't like it, they have a 30-day money-back guarantee. Give Surfshark VPN the try you've been meaning to for months now by clicking my link below. There you'll get access to a gigantic 83% off a 2-year membership with 3 extra months packed in there for free. Now, without further ado, let's get on with the review. Amy's choice begins with quite a stunning and jarring introduction. It assumes that 5 years have just gone by and the horrors of the previous episode are thankfully long forgotten. It was rather odd that the Doctor had no conception of pregnancy despite being a doctor, as was him asking what staves off the boredom in Upper Ledworth when it was pretty damn obvious what these two would do to accomplish this goal. Right off the bat, I think this episode has a great premise. This dilemma of determining reality from dreams was a rather unique idea and made for a great mystery to solve as the story unfolded.
Listen to me, trust nothing. From now on, trust nothing you see, hear, or feel.
This added tension, whilst also prompting the audience to pay close attention to the details of each reality. Likewise, the Doctor instructs his companions to do the same. Even this dizzying, rotating shot punctuated this idea that we're not in for a typical Doctor Who episode. It felt like a weird combination of The Matrix and the 2007 episode Human Nature, but still felt unique enough to stand on its own 2 feet. It was also able to continue from the previously established story that the series had built up thus far, flawed though it was. We can safely say that the making Rory a companion issue had been swept under the rug at this point, but I think this episode does enough to justify his presence in the larger overarching story. This was Simon Nye's first and only time writing for the show, more known for his works in the comedy department such as Men Behaving Badly. His task for the episode was to dig deeper into the Doctor and Amy's relationship. He also wanted to bring out that she really does love Rory, he's not just a cipher boyfriend or fiancé. I definitely think this was the story we needed instead of Vampires of Venice, and I think Nye effectively met that criteria in this episode. I do find this episode genuinely funny at times too. I wouldn't say it's absolutely side-splitting throughout, but the insanity of the situation our characters find themselves in deserves a bit of humour to both keep the spirits up and to heighten the ridiculousness of the scenarios themselves. I loved how the characters argued over what constituted true and false in this very fictional setting. Rory was nicely convinced of the Upper Ledworth reality because it gave him everything he wanted. The home, the job, the stereotypical muffin-making wife, even people reacting with recognition of his achievements served to inflate his ego. I loved all that. He even got the opportunity to fairly compete with the Doctor a bit too in this episode.
Who's your friend? A junior doctor?
Yes.
We also got introduced to the antagonist of the episode, the Dreamlord, played by Toby Jones. His initial appearance was certainly impressive, how he seemingly killed the TARDIS and could zap left and right as he pleased.
Blimey, I'd blush if I had a blood supply. Or a real face.
Coming to terms with this character being the Doctor's inner voice of derision is interesting and makes for a greater appreciation of him on a second viewing. The bow tie, the tilted head, at times he really embodies a shadow of the Doctor visually. Unfortunately, the performances and costumes seemed to take away attention from this oddly placed balcony in the TARDIS. Characters occasionally appear on it in this episode, and it's no wonder they didn't go up there with the lights on. It looks awful. The characters then wake up in the care home and eerily all the elderly people have vanished. This moment's idea was there, but the execution felt a bit off for me. Instead of having the Dreamlord inside the TARDIS to explain the choice Amy must make, we get thrown a poorly placed joke about the Doctor's see-through brain. Only then did the characters realise the elderly were gone, when I think it might have been more dramatically interesting to have some close-ups of them waking up and reveal that the elderly had gone in this wide shot shown at the end instead. A similar thing happened later on in the episode when the children were turned to ashes. A rather frightening scenario lost its punch because we saw the piles of dust before the score came in. I also couldn't tell if the rather apathetic reactions from our two companions was the result of bad direction or them being in a dream.
Playtime's definitely over.
Oh my god.
What happened to them?
Rory and Amy have a fantastic little conversation back in the TARDIS. This was the exact conversation they should have had in Vampires of Venice that we were sorely deprived of. Earlier, the Dreamlord alluded to the idea that Rory isn't the man Amy dreams about, and we even hear some rather brutal justifications for her disappearance at the end of the 11th hour.
We're in a time machine. It could be the night before our wedding for as long as we want.
We have to grow up eventually.
Says who?
This fantastic reference to Peter Pan struck home and finally made me feel bad for Rory. Running throughout the episode is a deeper choice for Amy, of which man she will choose, the rogue adventurer or the faithful man. I loved the way that this episode toyed with fantastical ideas without making them too unbelievable. The gang then realised they were hurtling towards a cold sun, the possibility of which was something that the infinity of the universe couldn't rule out. All the way through, we're constantly looking for some kind of indicator of which dream is reality, and this would seem to be it. The possibility of both locations being dreams isn't something that's even hypothesized until the end, because the power we believe the antagonist wields makes us focus all our concern on meeting his demand and solving the puzzle. Then the elderly were on the march, and I actually thought this was a pretty hilarious idea.
Hello, Mr. Nameby. Rory, Mr. Nameby ran the sweet shop. He used to slip me the odd free toffee. Did I not say thank you?
The delivery of the lines here were just wonderful, and I truly wasn't expecting this old dude to throw Rory into the mud like that. There was also a rather funny bit later where a load of young people were being rescued into a hippie Volkswagen. I thought it was great they painted it red, not only to match up with the fire engine he previously drove around in Ledworth, but also seeing Toby Jones in the red racing gear, evoking images of the danger that surrounds the Doctor. Finally, seeing them laying siege to Amy and Rory's house was the height of this comedy for me. Unfortunately, the mandatory monster of this episode then appeared, as though elderly people having super strength wasn't weird enough. The main issue for me is just how selective this green gas they spew out was. It had the ability to do this to somebody who was relatively far away, whilst at two other times characters came face to face with it and managed to get off unscathed. I could just use the "it's a dream" excuse, but seeing this was just plain annoying to me, especially because this very gas was used for the climax of the episode, but we'll get to that. For some reason, the Doctor suddenly got hired by the Ministry of Silly Walks and ended up in a butcher's shop. I think I'll take this time to compliment Toby Jones and his characterization, because he is definitely one of the highlights of this episode. His seemingly unrehearsed poetry and how he undermines and criticizes the Doctor's behavioral cliches was great. Even all the costumes the crew stick him up in are all filled with purpose and create some great humor. Another aspect of the episode that was tackled excellently was all of Amy's pregnancy stuff, with Karen Gillan performing the pregnancy very convincingly and humorously.
Can we not do the running thing? This is real. I'm definitely awake.
Yeah, and you thought you were definitely awake when you're all elephanty.
Hey, pregnant.
Now, we all know there's an elephant in the room.
I have to be this size. I'm having a baby.
No.
Even all the labour scares fitted in brilliantly with the dreamlike quality of the episode. How this one event hung heavily over the story through emotions all over the place, as well as foreshadowing a very fantastic twist to come later down the line in the show. Back in the TARDIS, once again the value of a second viewing really plays out here, with the Dreamlord taunting Amy about how the Doctor continually leaves her behind. I loved the snowy aesthetic of the TARDIS, but I thought it was a shame we didn't see their breath as you do when it's extremely cold. Again, I know it's a dream, but I don't have as much emotional attachment to the characters if it doesn't look like they are feeling what they claim to be feeling. I think it's worth mentioning at this point too that I think they flicked back and forth between the two scenarios a few too many times. It's partially because continuously watching these three characters awaken and fall asleep becomes a bit tedious over time, and I think it might might have been funnier seeing them adapt to their realities as opposed to constantly questioning it. The pair then find themselves cornered in their dream child's bedroom. Rory seemingly showed his devotion to Amy by cutting off the continually mocked ponytail, and Amy just had the best line ever about how she was starting to like it. That was probably the best joke of the episode for me. The doctor then arrived and Rory got the green gas treatment. The music definitely gave me back shivers here, and I think this is one of those episodes in the Moffat era where Murray Gold's score really shines. Given the smaller budget this episode was evidently allocated, it's everything else, i.e. the writing, the performances and music, that hold this episode together. The reason I wasn't drowning in a puddle of my own tears at this point though was because of how they cut away from Rory just as he started transforming into dust. How they could show Dr. Constantine in The Empty Child transforming with frightening detail and then do this to us in a later episode is baffling, especially as this is supposed to be the emotional climax of the episode. Either way, it forces Amy to realize what she'd be missing if she left Rory. The choice had been made. Similar to the strange way Rory died, Amy and the Doctor topped themselves in this scene by crashing into the house inside a vehicle that probably couldn't go faster than 40. The final scene contains the final twist, that of both scenarios being dreams. By the end of the episode, you realize it was less of a case of spot the difference and more spot the fact you're doing a spot the difference in the first place. I was honestly quite thrown by this idea at first, as I liked the thought that the Dreamlord was some uncatchable enemy that enjoyed the game more than the victory. Seeing the Dreamlord reflected on the TARDIS console seemed to indicate that there are more inner demons the Doctor will have to deal with in the future, which is a great hook to keep you watching the show. The best thing of all though was how this ending strengthened Amy's relationship with Rory. You would think this would be the solution to a two-part series finale, but instead finds itself here to establish a new equilibrium. Halfway through the series, I think it's past time for some settlement, and it finds itself quite comfortably here.
Well then, where now? Or should I just pop down to the swimming pool for a few lengths?
Honestly, Doc, with a Chibnall two-parter up next, anything's preferable in my mind. So, did it suck? It's clearly a budget saver, but despite that, I think it's a fairly good episode. It puts the story on the right trajectory, if a little awkwardly, but as a standalone episode, it has quite a few strengths. The humour, the imagination, the performances, and the story. It fits right in with the mould of what a good episode from this series should look like. It's not perfect though, and seems to suffer with fairly typical ills this show tends to suffer from, like making it too much like a kids show and the mandatory monster. Let me know your thoughts about this episode in the comments section below, or have a chat with us on my Discord server. Don't forget you can support these reviews by making a pledge on my Patreon page. I give Amy's Choice an 8 out of 10. Played by Toby Jones. It is Toby Jones, isn't it? Yes, it is. Have to check these things last minute before recording. Where am I? Ah! After stalking some school children, Rory and no way. Seeing him reflected on the TARDIS console seems to indicate that there are more inner demons the dick. I am choking hard tonight.